Rob's Child here with Chapter 16 of Security Analysis. Nothing I say is investment advice, and my intention is not to replace any of the contents of this book, but open up the topics for discussion. So Chapter 16 is a bit boring, to be honest, but let's go into it. We're talking about income bonds and guaranteed securities. There's two parts to this, and then the guaranteed securities section continues into the next chapter. So I guess he doesn't have a whole lot to say about income bonds. They're also known as adjustment bonds. These are bonds that the payment can fluctuate depending on what's available. And some of the comments. So first of all, these kinds of bonds usually are involved with reorganization of a company. So if, let's say they go bankrupt, a way to reorganize the debt structure of the company oftentimes includes income bonds. And a lot of times they're very long dated. The ones they mention in here are something like 60-year bonds, maybe even longer than that. And so, I guess these two topics, income bonds and guaranteed securities, kind of fit together to some degree. Well, they connect in many ways, in many interesting ways. But anyway, so income bonds. One important thing he brings up about income bonds is how companies, we mentioned in an earlier chapter, and he mentions earlier in the book, how as long as they have available earnings, they have to pay the income bond interest rate. And if they don't have the earnings, then they don't have to pay it, or they pay as much as is available. They're forced to pay it as long as there are available earnings. Now, one way companies get around this is by basically claiming they have no earnings, or using the money to expand the business, or say, no, we got to pay for this, or they can make more claims on that money in order to not pay the income bond. So there's a risk there involved. So because of the position they have in a debt structure of a company, he says we should judge them by the same standards as we do of preferred shares, as we had gone through before. And that's all I think I have to say. He uses some examples of things that happened in history to get you to have a deeper understanding about how these things work. Probably worth reviewing if you're going to be going into getting any kind of adjustment bond yourself, this beginning part of this chapter. And then we go into guaranteed issues. Main points that I got out of this chapter were that guarantees are good generally. They're kind of a good thing. They're a little overvalued by retail investors, and they're actually a little undervalued by institutional investors. The idea is here, if you have the word guaranteed with your issues with your bonds, it gives you a sense of security, even though the truth is, if the company goes bankrupt, if they can't pay, they can't pay. So guarantees have limits. Where we can have a better sense of guarantee is towards the end of the chapter. There's a section about joint and several guarantees. So that's when you have several companies, maybe a parent company along with a company, or a group of companies together guarantee each other's debt because they're in the same industry. And that's happened. There's several examples of how that's played out to the favor of the investors. Earlier point as well to bring up, there's a subtitle in here, exact terms of the guarantees are important. So we don't want to just go with the title guarantee. Be careful with what the guarantee actually says. And I think that's all I'm going to talk about. I think the greatest takeaway from the second part of the chapter regarding guarantees so far is simply, watch your back. Basically, when there's a guarantee on something, make sure you know the full implications of that guarantee. That you know the limitations of it and know the possibilities of it. And he goes through examples that to read about. And that's it. That's it for this chapter, for chapter 16. See you next time in chapter 17. Rob's Child.